my relationship obviously is not as a Chicana, it's as an African-American woman. And I'm a native of San Francisco, so one with me and the rest is history. But I was very involved. In high school, I was the president of this San Francisco Student Union. And so at that point, I went to Cuba at 16 on the first Vincent Amos Brigade. And Vincent Amos Brigade was an exchange program while travel to Cuba was illegal. And my mom didn't, it was said that I could go because she didn't think I was going to be able to go because they were saying that I was the youngest person that had ever attempted to go. So she said, yeah, you can go. But then when she found out I was going, and they selected me, she told me, no, you're not going anywhere. And I said, I'm running away. I'm going to Cuba and all this stuff. And so then I had a friend, luckily, who had parents who were lawyers. So my mom, recanted her. She became really close with these folks because she knew that she couldn't get me out of Cuba if something happened to me, but she knew they would do everything. They said they would do everything to help me get out. And then she concocted this whole thing. If the FBI came, she was going to say that I was brainwashed. And I was young enough so it wouldn't wreck up my chances of getting a federal or state job. So then she kind of got into it. My mom was very progressive. My parents met at a Henry Winston socialist club. I don't think my father was so conscious, but his mother was really active. But my mom was really a very conscious person. She was active. She was in the War Resisters League. She was a job developer. She'd lie and get people jobs. And she did a lot of stuff. She marched for the anti-war stuff. She was very active, real animated, really intelligent. My father was a provider. That's what I say about him. I don't know if he wasn't really in the picture at that time. So that was my first experience, really strong political experience, was going to Cuba. And what I saw there just transformed my life and gave me a kind of a lifelong commitment to social change and what was possible in a small country, 1/3 the size of California, could actually rebuff the United States' constant pressure. I mean, it wasn't really until the downfall of the Soviet Union that Cuba fully felt the changes and the stagnation that really took place, because all the technical assistance was gone, all the wheat suppliers and the people that would both export and import and educate the population of teachers and trained people, that was gone. So the infrastructure was weakened, But it was still, when I went, it was in 1969 to 1970. I was there till after Christmas Day or something like that. And so it was 20 years after the revolution, so you can imagine it was a really young thing. I mean, for the first time I felt like I saw black people that were actually in different levels of the country. The police, I didn't feel afraid of the police. I saw people actually in the countryside who were armed. And, contrary to what you hear about Cuba, well, the people aren't armed, they're all scared, and the military is totally repressive. There was a high literacy rate. People read, they knew everything, they thought they knew everything about our country, and I was young, so they treated me like I was a young person with a lot of courage, which wasn't really the case, but they really saw it as I'm a little sister. Wow, you risked so much to come here. And so I really got a really strong feeling, both the literacy campaign and the fact that I've been to places in Latin America, and you see ravages of polio, you see poor health care, you see poverty, and those things I didn't see. And I mean, we didn't go everywhere, but I was in Havana. It was basically a cane cutting brigade. That was with the first two, and then they became construction. So I was in the countryside some, in the city some, and also we traveled the 7 provinces throughout Cuba, so Camagüey, Santiago, all those places, and you could see the literacy campaign. You could see young people my age teaching people 80 how to read, and it was just so inspiring. And you saw people healthy, you saw people fed, you didn't see people hungry. And I mean, I know that there's been many changes, and I haven't really been to Cuba. Juan has been to Cuba since we went on separate brigades, but I haven't really been there since all the changes. And I know there have been a lot of changes, moribund leadership, old people trying to lead a country, mistakes, but no more than here. At least the people there, their per capita, or their ratio of doctors to people living in the country are like 3 to 1. And here, they train doctors. People go from here to get training and are sent all over the world. So it's the medical care and the literacy and the warmth and the openness of the people, the intelligence of the people, and the art was all the things that went into a very inspirational experience for me as a 16-year-old. So I came back from the Vincent Amos Brigade, and I recruited and trained people to go on these trips and spoke about Cuba and spoke about what was going on and trying to break the silence that perpetuated the blockade. So I think I was part of recruiting maybe Juan on the brigade that he went on. I'm not sure. But I did that, and I was going, at that time, I went from high school to UC Berkeley because I was pre-med before I came to my senses. And that was because we were at a time when you were supposed to learn these skills and come back to your community and help the community, whether it was in medical or being a lawyer or getting people out of jail. I mean, there was just a certain list of things you were supposed to do, but I realized that early on that I was really interested in the arts, and so I finally said, okay, there's all this stuff going on at state, I'm going to transfer to state. Forget being a doctor, I'm going to take some art classes and philosophy classes and be where the pulse of the thing is. And that's how I met my first roommates through the brigade, and then I was Juan's roommate.
Into where I was living, okay.
And the rest is history, because we've been together for over 40 years probably. So, but I felt like I came from a very different angle. I mean, my parents were really active in civil rights stuff, and both my parents are from New Orleans. And I've never been to the South. I mean, I've been to the South now a little bit, Texas, Arizona,
South
Mexico.
America. Yeah.
But I had a real mixed review. So my parents were very aware. I mean, you just coming from New Orleans to work in the shipyards or in wherever the work was, and to have more opportunities for your kids. So my family came from the segregated South, so I always had that kind of mixed review, where you see your parents are really intelligent, like they know their own history because they were part of separate but equal education. My mom spoke Spanish because she had Spanish classes. We didn't have no other languages in San Francisco, although we got a fairly decent education. So I could see that there were certain things she knew about her history. But she also had some horror stories, about where you can go. There's an etiquette. You can't just go into a downtown store like you could walk into iMagnums or something. That you could actually be arrested or harassed or things like that. I mean, everybody had an uncle who was lynched. Somebody had some relationship to slavery. I mean, it was a very mixed review, but there were some really positive things about the South. But for those reasons, I never really ventured there. But I knew the struggles, and I was always involved in wherever there was racism or I felt like there was inequality or difference, I would always be there speaking out, because that's what I was kind of raised to do. I think the other thing that I learned early on is that as African Americans, we're not homogeneous, so we're not all the same. I mean, some people are really into the church, some people are not. Some people are really educated, some people aren't. Some people are laborers, some people are teachers and doctors. And so I always resented a kind of America's vision of other people. And then, of course, I got involved in, supporting the great boycotts and all that stuff. And I was really involved in initially the Third World Women's Alliance was what I was in, which wasn't a feminist organization, but it transformed to the Alliance Against Women's Oppression when it opened up to everyone. But they struggled around reproductive rights. We struggled about women's leadership role in the movement, which is sort of like, we know, all of us sisters, that all the work that we do, a lot of times it's in the background, and who's promoted in the front is men, and they're always being spokespeople. So we were like a women's group that was trying to establish a leadership role within the movement. So I did a lot of work around South Africa, apartheid, anti-apartheid work, embargoes, El Salvador, Nicaragua. All that stuff was part of our, and the International Women's Day, we kind of made that in San Francisco in the Bay Area. That was our hallmark event, in which we did a lot of organizing, and Juan did a lot of posters for our event. So there's kind of, like Pancho was saying, 6 degrees of separation. So, he comes to my house to basically bring his work and to talk to Juan, and then he sees me and we're, hey, you went on for it, hey! and then I also feel like I didn't know where Watsonville was. Let me just be frank about it. I mean, I was a real city girl, and I knew where Carmel was, and Monterey, and maybe the Beach and Boardwalk, but I didn't know where Watsonville was, and I had never tasted the delicious apples from Watsonville, and so my consciousness was raised because we're in a, we have different backgrounds and we're raised in different ways, and we have children, and so when you do, you have to raise your consciousness and get to know who your family is and what your expanded family is and all that. So I was really welcomed by his family, which he comes from a family of 11, and my mother comes from a family of 12, so I could kind of get on the train with the sisters in the kitchen, talking our stuff and cooking and laughing, and but it was a lot of, I can't say that I really understood the plight of Chicanos or Chicanas really until I met Juan, and then I started to get the picture of what it really was in the fields, and how people carry, I had a sense of it, a noble, righteous sense of just, you bond with people who are struggling, but I didn't really understand the poverty, the illness that comes from the fields and the things that were done to people here, and the education, the tracking. Just everybody was in wood shop or auto body mechanics when Juan was really tracked in some ways, even though he loved wood shop. I just think that I wasn't really exposed to that same segregation that really goes on and really limits your possibilities, although I could kind of understand it through my parents' experience, because you don't have access to everything fully. But I think, my relationship with Juan was one of really learning, and we joined in each other's struggles and each other's consciousness got raised. I think Juan's a lot around women's oppression and understanding that it was really a triple jeopardy thing that we faced as women of color, as women, as people of color, and our class, dictated where we fell in the whole constellation of things. And so I raised his consciousness, he raised my consciousness, and it was really a beautiful